We rarely notice the subtle ways we are training our brain every single day. The brain is not just passively sitting inside our skull, it is constantly being shaped, rewired, and molded by the information, experiences, and habits we feed it. What you put into your body matters, but what you put into your mind matters just as much, sometimes even more. Yet most people continue feeding their brain things that slowly damage it without realizing the long-term impact. Think of your brain as a living system that adapts to whatever you expose it to. If you constantly feed it stress, negativity, and low-quality information, it will adapt by becoming more reactive, more anxious, and less capable of deep focus. If you feed it curiosity, balanced information, and meaningful connections, it will adapt by becoming more resilient, calmer, and sharper. This process is called neuroplasticity, and it is one of the most important discoveries in psychology and neuroscience. Your brain is plastic, meaning it can reshape itself depending on what it repeatedly experiences. But plasticity is neutral. It works in both positive and negative directions. Many people unintentionally train their brains in ways that make them weaker over time. A common example is constant exposure to sensationalized news or endless scrolling on social media. The human brain evolved to pay attention to danger, threat, and social cues because those things were necessary for survival. When you feed your brain a never-ending stream of fear-driven headlines or comparisons with other people's highlight reels, your brain thinks it's living in a world of constant danger or inadequacy. Slowly, this erodes your ability to feel safe, content, or satisfied with your own life. People often wonder why they feel restless, anxious, or drained, but the truth is they are training their brains every day in that direction without noticing. Another way people feed their brain harmful material is through the belief systems and inner narratives they repeat. If someone constantly tells themselves, "I'm not good enough," or "I'll never succeed," the brain encodes those thoughts like repeated practice. Just like practicing a sport strengthens certain muscle groups, practicing self-critical thoughts strengthens those mental pathways. Over time, the brain starts defaulting to those negative beliefs automatically. What started as a passing thought can become a deeply ingrained lens through which the person views themselves and the world. This is why psychologists emphasize the importance of self-awareness. Being aware of what you are consuming mentally, both externally from the environment and internally from your own self-talk, is the first step in changing it. Many people assume that thoughts come and go without much consequence. But in reality, each repeated thought is like laying down another brick in the foundation of how your brain functions. Repeated negativity does not just stay as passing noise. It reshapes how your brain processes experiences in the future. An everyday example of this is how people handle stress. Imagine someone who, whenever a challenge arises, feeds their brain with thoughts like, "I can't handle this," or "This is too much." Each repetition reinforces a neural circuit of helplessness. On the other hand, if another person in the same situation consistently tells themselves, "This is difficult, but I can find a way," their brain strengthens pathways related to problem-solving and resilience. Over months and years, the difference between these two people becomes dramatic, not because of external circumstances, but because of what they've been feeding their brain. It is not only thoughts and media consumption that matter, but also the quality of conversations we engage in. Surrounding yourself with people who constantly gossip, complain, or criticize is another subtle way of feeding your brain toxins. Human beings are wired for social mirroring, meaning we unconsciously absorb the emotional tone and habits of those around us. If your daily interactions are filled with cynicism and negativity, your brain will slowly normalize that state as the default. In contrast, spending time with people who challenge you, support you, and engage in meaningful discussions trains your brain toward openness, learning, and optimism. Sleep is another factor that people overlook when thinking about what feeds the brain. When someone consistently sacrifices sleep for work or late-night entertainment, they are depriving their brain of its natural cleaning and recovery system. During deep sleep, the brain literally washes away toxins and consolidates memories. Without it, the brain becomes foggy, reactive, and more prone to emotional imbalance. While most people focus on what they eat or drink for health, fewer realize that what they feed their brain through sleep hygiene is just as vital. Nutrition also plays a role, but not in the oversimplified way people sometimes think. A diet high in processed sugar and low in essential nutrients does not just affect the body. It also alters brain chemistry. Sugar spikes lead to crashes, which affect mood regulation and attention. Lack of omega-3 fatty acids impacts the flexibility of brain cell membranes, influencing communication between neurons. These are not abstract scientific ideas. They translate directly into how easily you can concentrate, how stable your mood is, and how quickly you recover from stress. Digital overstimulation is another silent brain killer. Constant notifications, multitasking, and rapid switching between apps feed the brain with fragmented attention. Over time, this reduces the brain's ability to sustain deep focus. It is like training a muscle to only perform quick jerks instead of building endurance. The more the brain gets used to shallow bursts of attention, the harder it becomes to read a book, work deeply on a project, or even hold a meaningful conversation without distraction. People often describe this as, "My attention span is getting worse," but in reality, it is not something that just happens. It is something the brain has been trained into. At a deeper psychological level, there is also the issue of avoidance behaviors. Many people feed their brain avoidance instead of engagement. For example, instead of confronting uncomfortable emotions, they turn to distractions like binge-watching or mindless scrolling. While this provides temporary relief, it trains the brain to expect escape whenever discomfort arises. The long-term effect is that the brain becomes less capable of tolerating even mild stress or boredom, making resilience weaker over time. The good news is that the brain can be retrained in healthier directions. Just as harmful feeding can weaken it, intentional feeding can strengthen it. Choosing to engage with thoughtful content instead of endless negativity, practicing gratitude instead of criticism, and cultivating mindfulness instead of constant distraction all shape the brain toward balance and well-being. Small, consistent changes compound into powerful transformations. A person who spends even 15 minutes a day reading something constructive or reflecting on their values is training their brain toward depth and clarity. This is why psychologists often recommend practices like journaling, mindfulness meditation, or setting boundaries with digital media. These are not quick fixes, but long-term ways of feeding the brain with patterns that build resilience. For example, mindfulness meditation trains the brain to notice thoughts without immediately reacting to them, which gradually rewires emotional regulation systems. Journaling externalizes thoughts, reducing mental clutter and helping the brain process experiences more effectively. Limiting media exposure prevents the constant activation of fear and comparison circuits. The core principle is simple. The brain becomes what it is repeatedly fed. Whether it is fear or hope, distraction or focus, criticism or compassion, the material you allow into your mind shapes who you become. Many people search for life-changing strategies while overlooking the most basic daily inputs that shape their mental health. You do not need a radical transformation. You need consistent awareness of what you are allowing into your brain and small steps to shift it in healthier directions. When you stop feeding your brain what is slowly killing it, whether that's toxic media, destructive self-talk, low-quality food, or fragmented attention, you create the space for your brain to thrive. And when your brain thrives, every part of your life improves, from relationships to work performance to emotional well-being.